This evening's lecture couldn't be more topical. I think we wanted to expose Australians to India's perspective on the issues of Afghanistan and Pakistan. There's a big debate going on in Australia at the moment about the nature of Australia's security interests in that part of the world. There's no debate whatever going on in India about your security interests in that. There's no question that India's interests in Pakistan and Afghanistan are absolutely critical. Our timing for this lecture has been, you might almost say, tragically prescient, given the recent inroads of the Taliban in Pakistan, the escalation of fighting there, and the growing number of casualties and refugees. There's a widespread view that the situation in Pakistan has reached a critical juncture with implications for the future of Pakistan as a state, the safeguarding of its nuclear weapons, and the wider struggle against jihadist terrorism. Ambassador Gharekhan is one of India's leading authorities on Southwest Asia and has had a long and distinguished career as a diplomat and senior UN official. He's India's special envoy for West Asia and the Middle East peace process. That's also of interest to us at the Institute because one of our visiting fellows, Rick Smith, former Secretary of our Defence Department, has just been appointed as Australia's special envoy on Afghanistan and Pakistan. Ambassador Gharekhan has served as India's permanent representative to the UN in New York, including as India's representative to the Security Council. He was the permanent representative to the UN in Geneva and additional secretary in the Prime Minister's office. He retired from the Indian Foreign Service in 1992, but then served as Under-Secretary General in the United Nations, first as the UN Secretary General's Special Representative to the Security Council, and then as Special Coordinator on the occupied territories. Ambassador Gharekhan's visit to Australia is supported by the Australia-India Council, and I'm very happy to see Suzanne Davies, the Chair of the Council, and Sandy Olway, the Deputy Chair, here, and we're delighted to be partnering with the Council. After I've invited Ambassador Gharekhan to speak, my colleague Rory Medcalf, who is formerly the Program Director for International Security at the Institute, but informally in charge of India, a country that he loves and where he worked in the Australian Embassy. Rory will coordinate questions and answers afterwards. So it's a delight to welcome Ambassador Gharekhan and his wife, Rita, to Australia, and let me now invite him to talk about India's security challenges, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the neighbourhood. Ambassador Gharekhan.
India is situated in a tough neighbourhood, and it is getting tougher by the day. The environment in our region is unstable and highly volatile. Leaving aside Pakistan for the moment, nearly all our immediate neighbours are facing serious problems of internal instability, which often motivates them to look for a scapegoat in India to divert the attention of their citizens. Let me deal briefly with the other neighbours first. Since the overthrow of the monarchy in Nepal, the anticipated establishment of peaceful and harmonious relations among the various players has not materialized. The coalition government in Kathmandu is or was headed by the leader of the extreme left Maoist party. He sacked the chief of army a few days ago, but the president refused to act on the dismissal, prompting the Prime Minister to resign. The situation is extremely unstable, given the fact that the border between India and Nepal is completely open, with the citizens of Nepal not needing a visa to enter India. We have every reason to be seriously concerned at the instability in Nepal. We have our own Maoist Naxal menace in India. It is therefore not difficult to appreciate the apprehension that is felt by many in India about the possible link-up between the ruling Maoist regime in Kathmandu and the Indian left-wing extremists. Bangladesh and India have had somewhat uneasy relationship since the creation of the state of Bangladesh in 1971. After the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation, in 1975, Bangladesh has alternated between periods of army rule and democratic governments in which two women leaders have taken turns at becoming prime ministers. The leadership of the two countries, in an act of statesmanship, managed to remove one of the most difficult irritants with the conclusion of an agreement in the 1970s on the sharing of the waters of the river Ganges. Unfortunately, there are elements in Bangladesh establishment which feel that they can come to or retain power only by adopting a posture hostile to India, in the belief, in my view a mistaken one, that the people of Bangladesh do not want friendly ties with India. Incidentally, Mrs. Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan had made a similar miscalculation while contesting elections which she lost in the 1990s. She was honest enough to admit later that she had made a serious mistake by campaigning on an anti-India platform. In recent years, the jihadi elements have taken significant roots in Bangladesh. With the help, we believe, of Pakistan's famous or infamous inter-services intelligence. The coming to power of Begum Hasina through a democratic election last year holds out a promise for better relationship. But both sides will have to be vigilant and sensitive to each other's concerns and interests. The situation in Sri Lanka is too well known to be described in any detail. Our relations with our neighbor to the south have improved dramatically over the last decade, especially after India made many unilateral concessions while concluding a free trade agreement with Colombo. However, the Tamil insurgency in the north of the country has always been a major factor, not only in our bilateral relationship, but even in India's domestic politics. The Tamil community in Sri Lanka, which constitutes about 20% of the population, has had legitimate grievances which successive majority Sinhala-dominated governments in Colombo did practically nothing to satisfy over the years, leading to the outbreak of the armed insurgency by the Liberation Tamil Tigers for Elam in 1983. When the Tamil Tigers assassinated India's Prime Minister in Chennai, formerly Madras, in 1991, they lost all sympathy in India. The Sri Lankan Tamil factor came out most forcefully in the ongoing general elections in my country. The manner in which President Rajapaksa handles a situation, as and when he manages to neutralize Tamil Tigers and its top leadership, will have important and lasting impact on India-Sri Lanka relations. Among our smaller neighbors, Bhutan is our ideal partner. Bhutan has enjoyed an unparalleled period of peace, stability, and prosperity, thanks largely to the wise leadership of its monarch, which was fully reciprocated by India's enlightened approach towards the kingdom. India has tapped into Bhutan's considerable hydroelectric potential. India buys all the power at a handsome price, with the result that Bhutan has the highest per capita income in South Asia. There is similar immense potential in Nepal also for hydroelectric power, which we have not been able to exploit due to mutual suspicions. Maldives witnessed a peaceful transfer of power in 2008 when President Gayoom lost the elections after having been in power for 30 years. India has cordial relations with the government in Malé. However, recently, disconcerting reports have appeared suggesting that Maldives is being used by jihadis for training before moving on to Pakistan. Thus, if you add Pakistan and Afghanistan to the above brief description of the state of affairs among our neighbors, you will, I'm sure, come to the conclusion that India is a vast sea or ocean of stability and economic development surrounded by significant islands of instability and violence. I don't want to say that India is an island of stability, rather we are an ocean of stability surrounded by all these pockets of instability. Before I move to Pakistan and Afghanistan, I should mention that it has been our consistent endeavor to forge cooperative relations with all our neighbors. It was and remains our hope that the governments and peoples in those countries would realize that they have a lot to gain from India's rapid economic growth. India offers an unlimited market for their products. In 2007, the Prime Minister of India announced the grant of zero duty access to products from least developed countries with effect from 1st January 2008. One of our Prime Ministers, Mr. I.K. Gujral, propounded a doctrine in early 1990s, which has come to be known as the Gujral Doctrine, according to which India offered unilateral concessions and benefits to its neighbors without expecting them to make reciprocal gestures to India. The dilemma for a big country is that even when it makes a generous offer, it is viewed with suspicion by its smaller neighbors. We shall, however, continue to hope that with more effort on our part and some understanding on their part, and given India's continued growth, albeit at a slower rate in the current gloomy global economic environment, the atmosphere in the subcontinent would improve. Pakistan has fought 3 wars with India and has been waging a proxy war for the past 2 decades through encouraging and supporting cross-border terrorism in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. It is a matter of historical record that all the wars were initiated by Pakistan. Pakistan was established on the basis of its religious identity, one of only 2 countries to have been so created in the 20th century. The extremely bloody events surrounding the partition of undivided India in 1947 has left a bitter legacy, which might yet take generations to fully overcome. India never accepted the two-nation theory, according to which Hindus and Muslims were 2 separate nations. The concept of Pakistan was propagated on the basis that the Muslims of the subcontinent could not be safe in a Hindu-majority India, and Pakistan was supposed to be the refuge for all the Muslims of the subcontinent. What actually happened was that an overwhelming majority of Muslims preferred to stay on in India. Those who migrated to Pakistan are, even today, not fully integrated into Pakistan society, and they even have to have their own political party. They are called the Mohajis, those who migrated to Pakistan. There is a lot of discrimination against them within Pakistan, even though they are fellow Muslims. This theory of 2 nations was definitively laid to rest when the then East Pakistan broke away from West Pakistan, although both were and are overwhelmingly Muslim states. The basic problem, to my mind, is the mindset of the ruling establishment in Pakistan, primarily the army, but also the bureaucracy and the feudal elements. Pakistan has convinced itself that India does not wish it well. At least this is its professed conviction. Hence their policy that they must do everything to harm and destabilize India. This explains the support to extremism in Kashmir, the infiltration of terrorist elements in other parts of India, and the staging of audacious terrorist attacks such as the one on Indian Parliament in December of 2001 and the attack on Mumbai in November 2008. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that India wishes absolutely no harm to Pakistan. Indeed, we wish Pakistan to enjoy peace, stability, and prosperity. It is not in our interest to have a weak, unstable Pakistan, especially today. Pakistan will not succeed in its design and endeavor to create divisions in India. The Muslim community in India, which is 150 million strong, is and feels Indian. Thomas Friedman, the foreign affairs columnist of New York Times, noted in his piece in February that the bodies of 9 young Pakistanis had been lying in the Mumbai hospital morgue since November 29, since no local Muslim charity was willing to bury them in a cemetery. The leadership of India's Muslim community has called these 9 terrorists by their real name, murderers, and not martyrs. He quotes M.J. Akbar, a prominent Indian newspaper editor, as saying that Indian Muslims are proud of being both Indian and Muslim, and that the Mumbai terrorism was a war against both India and Islam. Friedman goes on to state that India's Muslims, the second largest Muslim community in the world, and the one with the deepest democratic traditions, are rendering a great service to Islam by delegitimizing suicide murderers by refusing to bury their bodies. They, the Indian Muslims, are not intimidated by extremist religious leaders and are not afraid to speak out against religious extremism in their midst. That is why so few, if any, Indian Muslims are known to have joined Al-Qaeda. The anti-Indian obsession among Pakistani establishment leads them to the conclusion that whatever causes harm to India is good for Pakistan, even if in the process Pakistan itself might get hurt. Ahmad Rashid, the well-known Pakistani journalist and an authority on Afghanistan, Central Asia, and the Taliban, has revealed in his fascinating book called Descent into Chaos that in 1988, Pakistan could have obtained recognition of the Durand Line as the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan at the time of the agreement ending the Soviet occupation, despite the United Nations prodding Pakistan to do so. Afghanistan, as this knowledgeable audience no doubt knows, never recognized the Durand Line and had voted against Pakistan membership in the United Nations in 1947. Ahmad Rashid quotes General Yaqub Khan, who had been Pakistan's foreign minister, to the effect that the military in Pakistan deliberately did not seek recognition of the Durand Line in order to gain what they call this strategic depth against India. Pakistan's thinking was that if there is no recognized border, Pakistan cannot be accused of violating international law and would be free to cross into Afghanistan as well as to send all kinds of help to the Taliban and other destabilizing elements. The United States seems finally to have understood the problem. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has publicly stated that the United States is leading an unprecedented effort to convince Pakistan to change its traditional focus on India as a threat and instead concentrate on the Taliban extremists. She has said that it is the extremist insurgency, not India, which poses existential threat to Pakistan. If the US can manage to convince Pakistan to change its mindset about India, it would be a significant step, perhaps even towards dealing with the situation in Afghanistan itself in a meaningful way. Would you excuse me if I take some water here? The United States and others would like India to do more in Afghanistan. We are willing. we have already provided a substantial amount of assistance, more than $1 billion to Afghanistan. However, the fact of the matter is that Pakistan simply cannot countenance any Indian role or presence in Afghanistan. Given Pakistan's paranoia about India, any possibility of India sending troops to Afghanistan, even for training Afghan army and police, is completely ruled out. Pakistan has protested vehemently even against the presence of Indian consulates in Jalalabad and Kandahar, alleging that India has deployed hundreds of persons in the consulates for anti-India, anti-Pakistan activities. But now no less a person than Richard Holbrooke recently stated in a television interview to a Pakistani television network that he had personally looked into the matter and found absolutely no evidence of Pakistan's allegation. Instead, he found that no more than 7 to 8 persons were employed in the Indian consulates. Holbrooke went on to add that the more than $1 billion aid program extended by India has been of immense benefit to the ordinary people in Afghanistan, as has the road constructed by India linking southern Afghanistan with Iran. India's aid program in Afghanistan has been the envy of other donors. And in fact, it is this road which India has built in Afghanistan, which could at some point in time provide an alternative route for the logistic supplies to the coalition forces in Afghanistan, as and when the Americans sort out the problem with Iran, of course. Pakistan is fortunate in its geography and has exploited it to the full, especially since the disastrous Soviet intervention in Afghanistan in December of 1979. Its present effort is to use the American dependence on Pakistan for logistics reasons, among others, in dealing with the Al-Qaeda menace, to extract maximum aid from America and others, as well as to bring pressure on India. The international community rightly feels that Pakistan cannot be allowed to go under and become a failed state. It has therefore been generous and pledged billions of dollars for Pakistan. The United States in particular has poured in several billions over the past decade. As I said earlier, we too would hate to see Pakistan become a failed state, and indeed wish the people of Pakistan to prosper. However, experience suggests that Pakistan has used foreign assistance mainly to strengthen its war-fighting capacity against India. Pakistan has been arguing that it needs to feel more secure on its eastern border with India in order to be able to concentrate more on the western frontier with Afghanistan. This argument no longer carries conviction with the United States or anybody else for that matter. Despite the grave provocation of the Mumbai attack, India did not deploy a single additional soldier on the border with Pakistan. Indeed, Pakistan establishment was frustrated that India did not fall into the trap laid for it by the Mumbai events. They expected that India would react in a knee-jerk fashion and take some military action, which would then have afforded a legitimate excuse to Pakistan to reduce its military deployment on its western frontier and to have to fight with the extremist elements there. The restraint exercised by India after 26/11 has won appreciation from the entire international community, although, I should add, it was not easy for the government, given the strong feelings within the country. The Afghan rulers and tribal chiefs played the British off against the Russians and vice versa, and inflicted military and political humiliation on both powers during the great game in the 19th century. Afghan tactics were even then full of courage and cunning. They included assassinations, ambushes, denial of supplies, use of captured arms, double dealings, and deception. In the end, it was the defiant hostility of the Afghan tribesmen which compelled the forward imperialists of both Russia and Britain to yield to pragmatic counsels to leave the Afghans to their own tribal polity. Afghanistan was the only Asian country which, having faced full-scale repeated invasions from different powers, did not end up as part of a European empire. This is the Afghanistan which the United States and its coalition partners have to contend with in the 21st century. Not good news, I'm afraid. President Obama unveiled a so-called PAC-F policy in March after an extensive review of the situation and inputs from many scholars, analysts, and military commanders. The intervention in Afghanistan in the winter of 2001 was always regarded as a good war, primarily because it had the endorsement of the United Nations Security Council. It was also regarded as a winnable war. Now, however, no one expects that even the combined military might of NATO can actually win the war in Afghanistan. Next to the Americans, Canada has suffered more casualties than any other country in Afghanistan. It was therefore significant that the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Stephen Harper, said quite frankly in an interview to the CNN in March, "We are not going to ever defeat the insurgency," he said. He advised the United States to have a viable exit plan before asking other countries to do more. It was therefore reasonable that the main focus of Mr. Obama's AFPAC policy would be to devise a plan which would enable the US and others to eventually pull out of Afghanistan, leaving behind a semblance of governance in the country. President Obama's new approach envisages increased American military presence, training of Afghan army and police, and equipping them appropriately, accelerating reconstruction of the country, and sending experts in various fields. Personally, I am not convinced that the Obama plan would achieve the desired results. Adding 20,000 or 37,000 troops might produce pockets of stability, but only for a while. Training and equipping a well-disciplined Afghan army and police force is certainly essential, but it is doubtful whether this can be done within a span of 2 to 3 years. There is always the danger of Taliban elements infiltrating into the armed forces. Helping in reconstruction of the country is similarly desirable, but this presupposes a secure environment.